There we go. I was having a little technical difficulty getting the live started, so hopefully you're getting the message now and can join me. And if you do join me, it helps me to have you put a little comment in the comment section so that I know you're here and that you can hear me and you can ask questions there too. I want to remind people that my Facebook lives anyway, are public, open to the public as long as you're a member of Facebook. These aren't private conversations necessarily. They're recorded and also will be saved on Facebook and my YouTube channel. Sometimes you might even see them on Instagram. So my topic is neurodivergent relationships, and I've recently kind of changed that title, and I'll get back to that in a moment. But right now, today's topic is about intimacy. No sex, boring sex. Am I wrong to want fulfilling intimacy? So in this Dr. Kathy's office hours, I'm going to talk about our need to want intimacy with our neurodiverse spouse. It's important to us to feel loved, and intimacy is one of the most important parts of our connection. It's a special connection with your sweetheart. So we're going to talk about sex or the lack thereof in your neurodivergent relationships. This topic is the major topic for the presentations and the workshops and things that are going to be going on in June. Hi, thanks you. You got here, Corey. Thank you. So I'll talk about some of the events that are coming up. First, I want to make sure that you know that it's a public forum. Facebook's public, but we also have private groups when you want to have some private discussions. I have both a meetup group where you want to kind of dip your toe in and sort of see what it's like to get together with a group. And then we've got the premium forum, and I've got courses and a podcast. There's lots of books. There's lots of resources available to you to help dig in more deeply and learn about this. Not just about intimacy, but about your neurodivergent relationship. And so let me define that first, because it relates to sex and your partner as well, because that's a type of communication. It's a type of very specialized, important communication between people. So first of all, I tend to use the terms a little bit differently, and I keep morphing them myself. So a neurotypical is someone who's a non-spectrum person. They have a more, their neurotype, if you want to use that, is the dominant type in the world. Doesn't mean better, it just means the dominant type. Then I use the term neurodiverse to refer to people that are on the autism spectrum. They may also be neurodiverse in other ways. But primarily our group is talking about relationships when there's someone with high-functioning autism involved in a marriage, a partnership, or a love relationship with someone who's neurotypical. And that relationship I refer to as neurodivergent. It's a neurodivergent relationship. Now, I've recently sort of redefined a couple of things through the help of people who participate in our group. So there was a person on the spectrum, and he said, you know, I understand that my empathy does not work quite right, that I'm not as sensitive and as good a communicator as my neurotypical spouse, but I'm making an effort to understand the parts of empathy that I can access. And he said, I prefer to think of myself as empathy triad engaged instead of empathy triad blind. So neurotypicals are generally empathy triad sensitive, and the triad is, if you think about it, it's having the qualities of empathy that you can talk about, that you can engage in the contextual cues, and neurotypicals are really good at picking up all of that and staying connected. The neurodiverse, on the other hand, sometimes have delays or stay in one zone or the other. They, as opposed to flowing smoothly between intuitive, emotional, and cognitive empathy. So this man came up with this great idea. He says, you know, I'm not empathic like my spouse, but I am empathy triad engaged, and that's really important. Now, I've also changed the system of neurodivergence too, because you're in a neurodivergent relationship because it tends to neurodiverge, right? It tends to, or you collide. We'll get to intimacy too, because this is a part of it. Um, but if you think about it, if you're a systems therapist, if you're looking at how to solve these problems, communication, these connecting problems with your partner, what you're looking at is that there's something that goes on between systems that gets gummed up. If it's going smoothly, it's like neurotransmitters in the brain, those chemicals that take the message from one neuron to the next, right? Those chemicals are called neurotransmitters. There might be dopamine, serotonin. Those are called what we call neurotransmitters. And between the system of neurodiverse and neurotypical, sometimes there isn't a messenger carrying the message across to the other person. We have to help that along. So, how does that relate to intimacy? Well, there's a lot of ways. First of all, most of us aren't taught to have intimacy or how to cultivate that. We might be taught how to cook or go to school to learn a trade or a skill or get an advanced degree. We are taught a lot of things about how to be a person, but we're sort of on our own to learn about love and intimacy. And if we don't have an integrative approach, we may just learn technique as opposed to let's connect with this other person. So one of the reasons that it is a huge problem in neurodivergent relationships, if you're tracking with me so far, make comments if you have a question, because I'll answer your questions too. Just put them in the comment section and I'll come to it. One of the things that, if this starts making sense to you, probably the toughest area of your neurodivergent relationship is intimacy. It rarely works for most couples that I'm aware of. Now, it does work for some people. Somehow they've managed to rise above the neurotransmitter missing there. They figured out a way to add those neurotransmitters, take a little, emotional SSRI. But the reason it doesn't work, the reason that one partner or the other pulls away, is that you keep disappointing your partner with your approach. You give up because it feels bad, because you're out of sync, because what worked in the relationship within that first 6 months to a year of being enamored of the other person, that's worn off, and the relationship requires continuous growth and change and processing to get the couple, the individuals and the couple, to the next level. So I remember years ago one of my clients asking me about this topic. She said, I invite my husband to go to bed when I'm ready to go to bed. He might still be up doing something or other. And every time I say, hey, honey, I'm going to bed, how about you? Sort of a subtle invitation to come and snuggle with me at the very least, or be sexual. His response was to go and get on his computer and go work on a project. So one day she decided to ask him about this. She said, I've noticed this pattern that you tend to be avoiding me when I say I'm going to bed. And he said, well, that's because you have expectations. That's because you have expectations. She said, what on earth does that mean? And I said, well, of course you have expectations. Of course you do. You love this person. You want to be intimate. You want to share your body, your heart, your soul with your soulmate. And what he meant was not that you have expectations, but you have expectations that I can't meet. And he wasn't trying to figure that out. He was just pulling away out of fear or frustration or confusion. So right from the start, we have to start looking at, well, how do we reconnect? How do we get those synapses to send the neurotransmitter across between our systems? Hope that makes sense. It's not so easy to do. It has to be talked about. Everybody needs to slow way down. So you can use those techniques that you might have read about in some sex therapy book, or maybe you've gone to a sex therapist, and you can read about all that stuff. You can practice those techniques, but a lot of times it doesn't work for our neurodivergent couples simply because something else is needed. We need to realize that the love is there, but it's being demonstrated in such a different way we don't recognize it. And both partners need to get that. Both partners need to realize that, odd as it may seem, this other person is afraid to reach out to you. Afraid that they're going to disappoint you one more time, or that they're not going to be good enough. So it's really no different, is it, than the other dilemmas that couples have that are in these kind of relationships. It's the same kind of disappointment. I don't get you, you don't get me, I'm just going to pull away and sort of hide or be demanding. Sometimes we get controlling and want it to be a certain way. But that doesn't work either, does it? So I want to say one more thing about this, and then I'm waiting for people to ask me questions because I'm happy to answer them. But one more thing is that this topic is a difficult one, and I hear people bring it up frequently over the years I've been doing groups. I hear people bringing it up quite a bit as, why don't we ever talk about this? So I want to point out that one of the reasons is that people don't want to talk about it. I've hosted this topic on our private forums. I've hosted it probably every year, and I get 1 or 2 people to sign up. So I want you to think about that while I give you the list of, I'll get back to why that is. It seems like it's such an important topic, and yet people don't come to the conferences to learn what to do. So here's what's coming up in June, and it's not as full a list as we normally have, because I'm going to be out of town part of that time. So I'll tell you about that too. It's kind of exciting. So here's the topics for the month, and you might jot them down. If you're a member of Meetup, you can attend. If you're a member of the Premium Forum, you can attend. The Premium Forum is really an advantage because you get to go to as many of these conferences as you want to, and you can also chat with people in the community lots more easily than you can on Meetup. But like I said, Meetup's great for somebody who just wants to check it out. So the first conference in June is, have I got the date right? June 11th, No Sex Since Marriage, What's Wrong with My Neurodiverse Mate? And this is very, very common for the sex to just quiet down and disappear fairly shortly after getting together. Some people report that they've had several years and then it fell apart. But the idea is that there's a lot of expectations for the relationship to get closer and stronger. The next topic is entitled Affairs, Polyamory, Pornography, or Do I Have to Settle for Celibacy? So this is kind of a hard-hitting one. You know, how do I keep alive as a sexual being if my partner doesn't want to come to bed with me? That's on Wednesday, June 18th. And then I want to invite you to go to, on June 19th, our ambassador, Julie, is offering a free webinar, and it's usually entitled Going Over the Edge, Time to Take Your Life Back, but she can talk about the intimacy issue as well. But this is a great forum. What Julie does is she hosts a forum so that you start understanding all the ways in which you can get information, not just from the webinars, from the courses, from my books, from the podcast. There's ways to keep diving in and rediscovering who you are and who you are in your relationship. Now, those of you who are attending, who have signed up for the course on Asperger's Syndrome and relationships, I offer a monthly webinar for the course members too. This one is Finding Joy Again in a Neurodivergent Relationship. It's on June 11th. And joy, again, is also about the sexual part of the relationship. How do I keep that alive and well and happy? Then I mentioned the podcast. So what I started doing with my podcasts is pairing a podcast with what I call After Party. And so if you listen to this podcast, it's seeing the world through different lenses, mother and daughter on the spectrum. This isn't necessarily about intimacy, but the podcast is still about connecting the love in your family. And that'll be held on June 12th. So I think we got that one down. And then for July, just saying, the general topic is going to be, when was the last time you laughed? Do you feel invisible and isolated? So getting back to this topic of intimacy, I've noticed people made some comments. Corey, I want to talk about it, so I greatly appreciate you taking on this topic. Yes, and then James says, me too, I want to talk about it, and we appreciate you for putting this topic out there. Yes, all you have to do is join the forums, and you can talk more about it. You don't just have to hope that it's going to be talked about. And I have to tell you, right now what's going on in our forums is that people are talking about it. They're finally being brave enough to bring this up. It's not something that you just hope would get better, because that won't work. You have to take some action, right, to make it better. You have to talk to your neurodiverse or neurotypical loved one and say, I think this is something that is a reflection of our mismatched styles, right? The neurodivergence of the system. Remember, you are a system of systems interacting with a person who's a number of systems. They've got culture, they've got childhood memories, they've got notions of their first boyfriend or first girlfriend. They may have always dreamed that you were going to be just like some famous movie star or whatever it is somebody comes up with. And all that stuff needs to be dived into, needs to be talked about without complaining. Right? Such a sensitive subject. I mean, those of you who are parents, I want you to think about this. How many times do you ever sit down and talk to your children about intimacy? Do you sit down at the dinner table and say, hey, let's talk about how this works in our family? We don't generally do that, but somehow the child is supposed to figure it out. And you may have been brave enough to talk to one child about safe sex, maybe, or whatever, but not necessarily how it works with love. Intimacy and love. Why do we call it intimacy? Because it's really about intimate feelings. It's about wanting to share the real you, the whole you, with that other person. It isn't just about sex. Sex is one way we share with our loved ones, especially the special loved one. But in addition, you are a sexual being. We're human beings. We're flesh and blood. We've got all kinds of things going for us. I happen to like tea, but not all the time. I'm currently in a tea mood, and I'm drinking my licorice spice tea. And I forgot that I liked licorice spice tea until a couple of weeks ago. And I went, wait a minute, I like that. I haven't had any in maybe years. It's probably been at least 2 years. So I went to the grocery store to buy myself some licorice spice tea, and I couldn't find any. I thought, maybe it's just me. Maybe they don't sell it anymore. So I went online and ordered some. They do have it. And then I found the stores where I can find it now, so that I can have my licorice spice tea. It makes me feel good, right? So we have to explore our resistance to learning new things, or to bringing up something from the past that we haven't talked about for a while, right? And even though your partner may shut you down, or they say all kinds of things. People say things like, sure, we have sex all the time, I don't know what you're talking about, when you know it's not true. Or they might say, you have expectations, and that just really bugs me. Or they may have a sensory sensitivity. They may not like certain smells. I had a client a couple of years ago tell me that she was aware of who people were when they came into the room, even if she had their back to them, because she could smell them. I said, really? You can smell people from across the room? I said, oh, these are people that don't have bad hygiene. And she goes, no, everybody has a smell. Her sensory system was that attuned to smells, and she was unaware that her neurotypical husband didn't smell what she smelled. It's important to talk about that stuff. How can you be intimate with somebody? How can you put bodies together if you're not aware of what their sensitivities are? Not just emotional sensitivity, but there's auditory, visual, smell, taste. All that stuff comes into play, doesn't it? So I want you to think about why you haven't solved this yet, right? Why do you want to talk about it? Why hasn't it been resolved with someone that you fell in love with and chose to spend your life with? What do you think that was about? Maybe you just expected it to get better over time. Or maybe it was lovely at first, but things got in the way. You moved to a different town, you had the third baby, whatever. There are just things, careers got in the way. Something got you busy and you stopped looking at how do we communicate. Or you just grew up. We're not going to relate to our adult loved ones the same way we did to teenage dates. It'd be different. Wouldn't work. So we have to get aware of lots of different things. You have to get over your aversion to talking about this. We have to stop blaming anybody else. It's just one of those topics that's always been tough. Only tough because it's not common. It's not something you just sit down and chat with people. How's your sex life? How's your sex life? Even in the forums, by the way, nobody's talking technique. They're talking about how they feel. How I feel about this subject. Right? So don't be afraid. Join the conversation. So far, not one question. Just thank you for bringing the subject up. This is typically what happens. It's like, well, how do I ask a question? Where do I start with this? Anybody have an idea? Okay, maybe we start there. Maybe you tell your sweetheart, I have trouble bringing this subject up because I don't even know how to talk about it. Is it okay? Can we still talk? Right. That's what James said. It's difficult when our partners withdraw, avoid the conversation, find excuses that are not the real issues. So all you're seeing is the reluctance that most people have to talk about sex and intimacy. There's some weird notion that because you're an adult, you should already know how to do this. Didn't you all have to be taught how to put the napkin in your lap? Right? When you were a kid, didn't you have to learn? You couldn't ride a bicycle just by scratch. You probably fell off the bike a number of times unless you had training wheels. And even then, training wheels on your bicycle didn't feel the same as a tricycle. It balances different. So there's a lot of practice that goes into being a good lover. You have to be a lover for that person. And they may not know how to talk about it any more than you do. So if you get resistance, that's just, when I say resistance, when somebody's saying, I'm busy now, or I gotta go pick up a kid from piano lessons. I don't have time for this. It's true. They might have to go pick up the kid from piano lessons, but you can say, I know, this is a tough subject. I may not have brought it up at the right time, but let's talk tonight when you get home. Or let's go for a walk on Saturday morning and talk about it. Don't spring it on them by surprise, because this is hard, right? This is tough. Make sure you get permission to talk about it, and an appointment. It's almost like you have to have an appointment, right, with your sweetheart. But just let them know that I love you too much to let this pass us by. I love you too much. And for those of you who are anxious to talk about it, try to realize that not everybody is a conversationalist when it comes to sex. So it might be that you have to go a little slower. Just take someone's hand and go for a walk and say, thank you, it's been sweet. I enjoyed spending this time with you. Right? Does it make sense? I hope so. So here's another comment. It can be baffling. Let's see here. It can be baffling because we figured this out and it went well before we got married, then something changed. Exactly. Generally, what happens when you get married is this is very typical for the neurodiverse partner to sort of settle into, now that we're married, then I'm supposed to get into a new role. They like to do things by the rules, by the book. So I'm in my new role here of raising children or whatever it is, forgetting that the first reason to be with this other person was that you fell madly in love with them and thought they were hot. You forget that. So that's, it's not that they don't want to figure out what to do, but they can be very compartmentalized, if that makes sense. Oh, and this is good. Yeah, this other comment. Any tips for when a spouse is critical of himself or herself around body image issues in the intimacy? He is so critical of himself in this area, whereas for me, I'd rather he focus on connection and less being in his head criticizing himself. Exactly. So the neurodiverse person can really be stuck on details that the neurotypical doesn't care about. Right? The neurodiverse person is worried that somehow they need to have a technique or they need to have, a better looking body according to, I don't know, some standard. Whereas the neurotypical is saying sex is part of the whole package of us being together. And so how do you get them out of that critical stuff? Well, again, I think we have to talk about it, but you might just gently, touch the person and say, it's okay, let's just sit here. Let's just hold hands and watch TV. No, nobody's going to expect anything else tonight. The idea is little by little help that person know that they're loved for more than their body or their sex acts. But it's not easy to get somebody who's very compartmentalized, who's compartmentalized their life, who's transactional. It's hard to get them out of performance anxiety. On the other hand, those sex education, those sex therapy models often are really good for people on the spectrum, because if they need some techniques, they can learn them there. They can learn about foreplay. They can learn about, how to interest their partner in an evening of sex or whatever. They can learn the techniques that work, and they do work. Now the problem is that if they don't eventually internalize this to see themselves as a sexual being and an engineer and an artist and a gardener and all these other roles they play, they need to see themselves as a whole being, and I think that's what Corey's going after. But if they learn techniques, they can at least feel like this is better than avoiding my partner entirely. You just want to grow past the techniques only, right? Also, I want to mention this comment about criticizing. Remember that neurodiverse folks can feel criticism when there is none. So, and in this really highly charged subject of sex and intimacy, they can feel like you are critical when you say, I just want to talk about it. I'm not blaming you, I just want to talk. They can still feel blamed. I think that's a therapy issue, and I think that it's important to tell your partner, I can tell you till I'm blue in the face that I'm not critical of you. I just want to work this out with you. I love you. But maybe we need to talk to the therapist about that. It's just probably a lifetime of being on the spectrum and generally undiagnosed for most of the adults that are dropping in on this call. They're sort of used to being punished for not understanding the social interaction. So you can, I would still say this isn't critical, but it is a problem. I want to talk with you about it. And I'm not, it's not all you. I want to know what I'm doing here that makes it hard for you. Does that make sense? Hope so. I was thinking about, you know, I want to emphasize that as a psychologist for 45 years, I've had more neurodivergent couples with intimacy problems than other couples. This is pretty normal for this group, and it's probably because of these two different styles, the more interactional, empathic sensitivity style that you see with neurotypicals, and the more transactional, even if empathy engaged. That transactional approach means there's a winner and a loser. And so that gets in the way of joining together as a couple. There's no winner or loser. There's, spending time with my loved one. There's no goal, right? There's no goal. Sex isn't a goal. So what the neurodiverse person needs is help understanding that there's no goal here. This is the process of being fully present, fully right there in the room with your loved one, just being present. That's important. That's what you want, I think. Right? How do I be just present enough to let time melt away? And you probably did that when you were young or when you first met, because it didn't matter if there was anybody else around. Hope that makes sense. Now I know there's people watching. I see the number there. I see people in the room. Go ahead and feel brave and make a comment. Ask a question. Nothing yet? Nothing more? Well, let's talk about some self-care. If you don't address this difficulty you're having in your relationship, it can really drive you crazy. It's not like you need sex for survival, but maybe you do, right? What we know about love is that human beings need to be loved and to give love. It makes us mentally healthy. Okay, so I want this is related to one of our topics, affairs, polyamory, pornography. Some people look for other ways to make this very important connection. And I'm not going to say it's wrong to necessarily do that. I would hope that you and your partner would agree that that's okay, so that you're not doing something secretly behind their back. But, so Debbie, sometimes, James says, sometimes relating fully present, relating deeply, another is difficult, right? With another is difficult. Absolutely. Being fully present can be really tough, but when you can do it, it feels great. And let's see, Corey says, when I have previously asked for foreplay as gently as possible, partner has said that he doesn't have time for that. My thought is, well then, you don't have time for sex. But the problem is that when he's happy to just not have sex, any advice? Okay, right. Foreplay is like chit-chat. It's a sweet little connecting behavior, and sometimes that's all it is. Sometimes you just enjoy a little foreplay because you felt appreciated and loved, right? So what Corey's talking about is that you're setting up the moment. You're engaging in it little by little, taking little tiny steps. And that being present is so dang important for a love relationship. And I think James is right. Sometimes relating fully present is difficult for people, for neurodiverse folks. because they keep thinking in terms of that black and white, that there's an agenda, there's a goal. I need to make him happy, as opposed to, I want to engage happily with my sweetheart. So yes, Debbie said, when you're an older couple, does it make it even harder to connect? Yes, if these things haven't been dealt with. But honestly, I have had men on the spectrum in their 70s leaving incredible comments on my podcasts and my blogs about practicing empathy triad engagement. They want to know what this is about. They love their spouse so much, but they know that she doesn't feel very loved. So yes and no to Debbie's question. Does it make it even harder to connect? It makes it harder to connect on the downside when you haven't been attending to it, to the problem. You have been attending to it. You've been aware of it. You've been making every effort to improve things. It's just that you haven't been working it in such a way that the other person is willing to work with you. You've just kept bringing it up in typical neurotypical fashion. Why does he say that? It's like this woman said, well, what does he mean you have expectations? It's like, well, of course I do. So it's about really attending to what's shutting the neurodiverse person down, as opposed to, but why don't you just talk about it? Has that worked anywhere else, that we can just openly have a conversation about anything? Not really. On the other hand, don't give up because you're older. What the heck? This life's too short. Don't give up. The idea is that you can even use that as leverage. You can say, we've got 10 years left, or 15 years left, or 2 years left. We don't know how much we've got. But, I want to go out with a bang. How about you? That might scare them. But at the same time, deep down inside, your unresponsive, resistant partner wants to know how to fix this. You got to believe in that. Also, by the way, another comment about older probably has to do with body function. Some people's bodies take longer to warm up, or they've had surgeries, or they're on medications that make arousal and all these various aspects of intimacy more difficult. Not impossible. Not impossible to still connect intimately, lovingly, sexually, and, be this elderly couple who's sitting in a restaurant, and they're just gazing into each other's eyes, and when they walk out, they're giggling, and everybody goes, I wonder what they're going home to do. You want to be one of those old couples, I think. Okay, how are we doing here? We're getting there. I hope I haven't missed somebody. I'm going to scroll back here and make sure I haven't missed a comment. So another way to help yourself with your relationship, by the way, is to say, I wonder what would have helped me be a better lover, partner, sweetheart when I was young. What did I need to know that I didn't know that would help me now? Because you probably know what the answer to that is. Yeah, James says, I want to be one of those old couples. Then start being one of those old couples now. Start imagining that I'm adored. Start with yourself. I'm adored. I'm loved. I'm desired, right? And I feel the same about her or him. Okay, here's the problem, James, with doing the after party after this event, because let's see here, this is a public recording. Let's see what he says here. Okay, he did put it in the chat. Just be careful that I can delete it after the recording. I can delete your Zoom meeting, but he offered to, James is offering to have a talk about this. And you can also do it on a different time too. You can, set the after party up for in the forum and ask people if they'd like to attend. I think it's a great idea to just keep stumbling your way through the conversation. How do we talk about it? How do we bring up technique with our sweetheart? How do we say, well, that works for you, but it doesn't work for me, without them feeling criticized, right? And therapists expect to hear about people's sex lives, by the way. As a psychologist, I expect it. I seldom hear it. I have to ask, usually. So it's one of those topics that we tippy-toe around about. So yeah, people are saying that they'd like to do the after party. If you look at the comments section, James put a link there for a Zoom after party after this Facebook Live, so you're welcome to go to that. If you're just listening to the recording, you will have missed it. But if you join the premium forum, which there's a link on the, oh, I forgot to mention that. At the top of this page for today's event, I listed a couple of links you could use to get in touch with our groups. One's for Meetup and one's all the resources that I offer through Thinkific. So, and if you join the the premium forum, you can participate in this discussion. Today, for example, I'm sure James will be there, and Corey, and a few others that are on the call today. Let me remind people about this too. Don't be afraid to talk about anything in the premium forum. Just putting your voice to it means you're freeing up the problem. You may not have an answer just yet, but attending to yourself by going and asking for help from other people frees up the answers, and they start floating around and being offered. Does that make sense? You've probably had this experience before. Okay, well, we've had a number of comments. Let me see here if there's anything else I missed. I don't want to miss anybody. Okay, so hopefully you'll join us for one of our conferences. That's a good question. Can you recommend a sample script for how to even bring up the subject of sex with partner? I think I already gave that to you, but I'll give it to you again. When you're not sure how to bring it up, just say that. We don't talk a lot about this. In fact, maybe we never do, or it always seems like such a difficult subject, and I'm no good at it. I'm no good at bringing up sex to talk about, but I want to. Always offer that, you don't have the answers, but you're willing to explore the answers with him or her. It's hard to refuse a request like that because everybody wants love to be better. Does that make sense? Start with, I'm not really sure how to bring this up, but I think it's important to both of us. Can we make some time to talk? Now, if you get resistance, and again, if the person says, well, I don't know what the problem is, maybe you should take that up with your therapist. You can say, good God, good idea, but I hate talking about you with a third person. I'd rather talk with you. You can keep reframing it so that you invite them in. Does that make sense? Give it a shot. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up today so that I got to get going. But remember, this is being recorded. It's going to go up on YouTube and Facebook. And I just surely hope you join our groups and participate with others who are living this life with you. You're not alone. Neurodiverse or neurotypical, you're just not alone. These are problems we're all facing as human beings. Okay, take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Oh, make sure you take note of the after party.